I'm Dr. Duke with the New American, and today I'm joined by Evan Mulch, Field Coordinator for the John Birch Society. And your area of specialty is mostly South Carolina, right? That's your territory. Other
Right.
states as well, Evan?
Yeah, I cover Georgia and I cover part of North Carolina.
Really important part of the country, right? That heartland where we need good constitutionalists. I know, like every other state, you are really, with the John Birch Society, dramatically trying to fight off the ConCon, the Constitutional Convention, the move, the push to open up our Constitution to gerrymandering by all sorts of special interest groups. Talk about what's going on with the ConCon battle in your states, the states that you represent.
Well, in South Carolina, there's a lot of momentum for it, and that's because at a recent Republican convention, a state GOP convention, the resolution for a ConCon that they had got passed, and it was railroaded at the event, and so they actually had sort of like a runaway convention to pass a resolution to call for a constitutional convention, which they call a convention of states. And the person at the microphone was Alan Clemens. Alan Clemens has been a longtime state representative out of the Myrtle Beach area, but he's also the former president of ALEC, the American Legislative Exchange Council. And so to see that the former president of ALEC is pushing this so hard in South Carolina, so much so that even at the GOP convention in South Carolina, even those that supported the call, uh, which Congress calls a convention. It's not the states, but it's an application to get a call for a constitutional convention. So even the people that supported this application, they even saw at this state convention how it was railroaded and how they couldn't trust the people in charge. And so a lot of people at the end were scratching their heads, and a lot of people were first-time attendees of the GOP convention. So it makes a lot of people wonder what's really going on here if we can't even pass this honestly at a state GOP convention. Could we trust them at a constitutional convention or convention of states, whatever you want to call it? In the 1990s, it was called the Conference of States. It's been called other things too.
Yeah, and I know enough about ALEC, right, to know how they screwed up education. So I'm not the least bit surprised that a former president of ALEC would be trying to hijack or push this through in states like California, South Carolina. But
Yeah.
go back a step. For those of us who may not be quite as familiar with ConCon as you and I are, take a moment and explain to listeners what exactly is the ConCon in a few words and why we would be very, very wise to avoid one.
Well, in Article 5 of the U.S. Constitution, we have two ways of amending the Constitution. One is through Congress, and one is through calling a convention. And when you call this convention, if something does get passed, then it has to be passed through the states. And the problem is that the Article 5 in the U.S. Constitution um, it's the same type of um, idea that was in the Articles of Confederation, Article 13 of the Articles of Confederation, to where our delegates at the Articles of Confederation back in 1787 decided that the articles were not what they wanted, so they took a few days to deliberate what they wanted to do, and they formed a new constitution. And thank God it was the U.S. Constitution. But the problem today is that the problem is not the U.S. Constitution. The problem is that we have representatives that don't care to obey the U.S. Constitution. So the question becomes, what do we need to change the U.S. Constitution to get congressmen to obey it? And the fact is, they'll never obey the U.S. Constitution the way the electorate is voting for their congressman right now. We're not going to get it. There's Congressman Thomas Massie does a great job, an outstanding job of obeying the U.S. Constitution. But the congressmen in South Carolina, they're at about 70% on the Freedom Index, which is the Freedom Index that John Birch Society uses to grade our congressmen. And it's a very strict it's a very strict grading report, as it should be. And so a lot of people in South Carolina that are pushing for this convention of states are quite caught off guard when I show them the voting record of Jim DeMint, or I showed them the voting record of, let's say, Congressman Jeff Duncan, because they assume in their minds that these are congressmen that have always done their best to obey the U.S. Constitution. But when I show them that they've given billions to the World Trade Organization, they voted for unconstitutional wars, they voted for illegal spying and stuff like that, that's something that catches these people who are just getting in as volunteers to the Convention of States project. So anyways, that's a simple, I'm trying to do this as simple as possible for because we have a short amount of time, but it's a call for a convention, and it's always been known as a constitutional convention, and anything goes at a constitutional convention.
Yeah, what I think is it was very well said. And to give an example, gun control, right? We now know from all the statistics, all the studies, that new gun laws would not have changed the vast majority of the current shootings. The problem is that killers are ignoring the laws we have. And it's the exact same thing with the Constitution, isn't it? Why do we need to open up the Constitution to try to force more rules or regulations or term limits or whatever it is when we're already ignoring what the Constitution does say? So simply by opening it up, you're not guaranteeing that more congressmen are going to follow it. What you are guaranteeing is that you're going to get a whole bunch of or anti-constitutional measures passed. Every state is different, Evan, and so South Carolina has its own complexion. In your state, what are they using to sell this to Republicans, to conservatives? What are the issues they say we'll be able to get if we pass a ConCon that would benefit conservatives?
Well, it's what you said earlier. You had said term limits as it would be they look to this as a benefit. But term limits, what I tell people is, if you want term limits, move to California or the state of Colorado, and you ask the people there that are, Americans, they're not on the left, they're with our principles, our core values, and ask them how term limits have helped them. And the fact is, term limits have sped up the process of the leftists taking over the states of California and Colorado. When it comes to the balanced budget amendment, there are states with balanced budget amendments. They still don't balance their budget. And the question becomes for them is what is a balanced budget? How many hundreds of trillions of dollars in debt is the United States going to be in and still have a balanced budget? Because to these people, having debt is no problem at all. In fact, as we're seeing right now with even the Republicans in Congress and even our president, Donald Trump, they're more than happy to spend as much money as they want to spend. And it happens on both sides of the aisle. So when is it that Americans are going to say, wait a second here, I'm indebted personally, a couple $100,000 now. So are my kids, and my grandkids are going to inherit this. When are we going to come back and just say, okay, let's obey the Constitution. Let's obey the Constitution. Eliminate this department, this department, this department, and instead of having term limits, let's just start voting for the candidate that there's no guarantees, but the ones that are most likely to obey the U.S. Constitution. And to do that, we have to understand the Constitution ourselves, which is why as a field coordinator, I go around my 3-state territory and I get people to teach the Constitution as the Solution workshop. And I can't say how important it is to get through that workshop if you're going to be a referee, sort of an Americanist referee, because you have to go around, you have to show up at these events with congressmen, and you have to make them feel the heat when they're not obeying the U.S. Constitution. I just did this the other day with Congressman William Timmons. He's my congressman, and I put him in a predicament where he had to tell the crowd that he supported red flag laws. Now, he said he supported the mild red flag laws, but that was the first time a lot of the people in that room understood that. And then I said, well, here we've got a guy supporting a mild level of red flag laws, and he also supports the call for a convention of states or Article 5 Constitutional Convention, whatever you want to call it. Should we trust this man in getting this call for a Constitutional Convention, or should we just sit back and think for a moment and decide for ourselves that maybe we need to switch him out with a new congressman?
Evan, in the short time we have left, about a minute, talk a little bit about the state of South Carolina right now, and what can South Carolinians do to fight the impending potential ConCon in your state?
Well, those in South Carolina, they need to contact me. I'm the field coordinator. So the best way to contact me is through Facebook, through Twitter. My name's Evan Mulch, EvanMulch. My phone number is 864-804-0789. And they can call or text me on that cell phone number, and I can help get them involved, because tomorrow actually is a big day for us. We have this hearing for a constitutional convention. They're calling it a convention of states, and we need as many people as possible. But also, if you live in another state, get in touch with your field coordinator for the John Birch Society. It is the best way to get involved, because the field coordinator knows what's happening on the ground, and he can send you in the right direction. He can send you to volunteers that are going to work on the same thing you're going to work on. And so the John Birch Society strategy works, but the problem we have in America is not enough people are involved yet, and that's what I'm trying to do out here in the field.
Evan Mulch, thank you so much for your time today. Regional coordinator for the John Birch Society. People in South Carolina, give him a call, give him an email, please. Thank you.